Hey, my kris here is stuck. Anybody got a mallet? Have you ever found yourself struggling to pull a kris blade from its sheath? No matter how much you huff and you puff, the blade simply refuses to budge. Now, is it possible that some supernatural force is at play here, making you wonder if the spirit within the kris deems you unworthy to wield its glory? Or could there be a logical and scientific explanation behind this curious phenomenon? What steps should you take to overcome this obstacle? Does it mean you have to break the sheath to free the blade? Or is there a hidden technique that can help you release the blade effortlessly? For that, keep watching to learn more. Hey, if we are meeting for the first time, my name is Keris Johari, better known as Pak Jofe, the Keris Collector from Singapore, your personal guide to the exciting world of the kris and its collecting culture. If you are a fan of history, art and mythology embodied into these traditional daggers that we natives of the Malay world refer to as the kris, be sure to subscribe and join our community right here on the Keris Collector YouTube channel. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to another video. Today, I've got something really exciting to share with you. Recently, a new enthusiast reached out to me with an intriguing question. How do you release a kris blade that's stuck in its sheath? Now, have any of you ever experienced this? If not, this is something you might encounter on your kris collecting journey. So, how does a kris blade get stuck in the sheath? Let's dive into the science behind the design of the kris sheath. Here we have a kris sheath commonly known as a sarung keris. This part here is called the sampir. For a detailed explanation of the kris parts and their related nomenclature, you might want to check out an earlier video linked right here. To help you visualize, I have overlaid an image showing how a kris blade is seated inside the sampir, making the sheath as transparent as possible to demonstrate the inner cross section. Let's start with the section below the sampir, the batang serunai, or the tube. As the name suggests, it's usually a hollow tube. The kris blade typically has enough room here so that its edges do not touch the sides, making it unlikely for the blade to get stuck in this section, unless there is an obstruction. Most of the time, there is ample room for movement. The batang serunai is usually made from two pieces of sapwood sealed together, though in rare examples, it can be a solid piece bored through from end to end. But I will dive into that in another video. Now, here is where the blade might get jammed, the sampir. This part is usually crafted from a single solid piece of hardwood. Unlike the batang serunai, which can be made from two pieces, although this is very rare, there are existing examples of sampirs made from two pieces, but they are not common. The sampir is bored to match the dapur, or rather the shape of the kris blade, creating an ingenious design that acts like a locking mechanism. Once the blade is seated flushed within the sampir, it can be secured in a safety mode similar to that of a sidearm or firearm. This prevents the blade from being easily or accidentally drawn out, such as when your sleeves get caught on the hilt, or the hilt is turned downwards. The locking mechanism is usually engaged by pushing up towards the eco-cichat side. However, this design can also lead to the blade getting stuck. There are two main reasons a kris blade can get stuck. Firstly, environmental factors can affect the material used. Some species of wood and land ivory can warp and shrink when temperature and humidity drops, clamping the blade tight within the sampir gap. Secondly, improper handling, when reinserting the blade, can wedge it too deeply inside the sampir, resulting in a stuck blade. Okay, story time! Before I reveal the solution to removing a kris blade that is stuck in the sampir, I would like to honor the individual who shared this invaluable knowledge with me. The late Mr. Sharif Rashid, also known as Raya Sri Takluk on Facebook, passed away on October 25th, 2018 from prostate cancer. Mr. Sharif was one of the senior kris collectors here in Singapore. He had an illustrious career as a photojournalist with the Straits Times before retiring as a driving instructor at one of Singapore's established driving schools. I met him way back in 2008 at a cultural event, and I had the privilege of viewing his private kris collections and its related accessories. Mr. Sharif was a humble gentleman who generously shared his expertise on kris, photography, and life in general. Today's topic brings me back to the evening that he shared this little known but practical information with me. I visited him at his home soon after learning of his diagnosis. Mr. Sharif, a practicing silat enthusiast with his own custom style, had a technique involving jamming an opponent's kris blade into the sheath before they had a chance to draw it. He often said, as did other silat gurus whom I had the honor of learning from, that a truly skilled silat practitioner will not draw their kris blade early in a duel. The philosophy of senjata makan tuan applies here. An unskilled opponent who draws their blade first often provides a skilled practitioner the opportunity to use that very blade against themselves. In a duel meant to teach a lesson rather than cause serious harm, a skilled practitioner will try to get as close as possible to their opponent and strike swiftly at the hilt of the kris blade, disarming it without causing serious damage. While I won't be demonstrating how this technique can be applied for obvious reasons, you can imagine the precision and skill required. So, in the heat of a duel or battle, how do you dislodge a kris blade from its sheath? You certainly won't be carrying a hammer or a mallet to smash the sheath open, right? In a moment, I will share the technique the late Mr. Sharif taught me. It's been nearly 6 years since his passing, and I do miss him, alongside many other mentors who have gone before him. It's rather cathartic to remember them and be reminded of the impermanence of life. To me, death is inevitable, but we shouldn't view it as the end. Instead, we should strive to leave behind a positive legacy that others can appreciate long after we are gone. Here's a ridiculously simple but scientific technique for removing a kris blade stuck in the sheath due to the natural environmental factors. Firstly, let us visualize what happens when the kris blade is clamped due to these factors. You see, some species of wood and even land ivory react to their environment, which is why back then people used to say that the natural components of a kris blade or even its fittings are alive and must be treated with respect. These organic materials respond to changes in temperature and humidity. In tropical climates like here in Nusantara, where the weather is predominantly hot and humid, but can become cold and wet during certain seasons, the fittings of a kris blade and a sheath can also be affected. During sunny periods, the effects might not be too obvious. However, when the weather turns cold and wet, you might notice significant changes, depending on the species and the section of the material used to construct the sampir or the metal composition of the kris blade. Several things can happen. When the weather gets cold, the sampir material may contract, warp, and shrink, while in others it may expand. This results in the blade being pinched, leaving no room for it to move freely. The kris might feel tighter than usual, requiring significant force to draw out the blade, or it might not sit flush when returned to the sheath. In extreme cases, the blade can become completely stuck. If this happens, do not panic. You have two options. Option 1. Wait for sunnier weather. When the weather improves, the sampir material will either expand or contract, depending on material and species of the wood, and it will eventually return to its original shape, making it easier to release the blade. Option 2. Use a modern hairdryer on the lowest heat setting and blow hot air on the sampir for a minute or two. The heat will cause the sampir to expand or contract, allowing you to release the blade. Afterwards, apply some kris oil or a modern lubricant to the ekor cicak to prevent the blade from getting stuck again when the sampir contracts and shrinks. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when the weather gets too hot, some metal compositions of a kris blade, though rare, may start to expand from the heat, causing the blade to get stuck in the sampir. This can happen if the kris is left exposed to direct sunlight. If this occurs, remove the kris from the source of heat and allow it to cool down naturally. Once the blade cools, you should be able to release it from the sampir. All the method shared here applies to scenario 1. The next scenario is more severe and requires extreme care. The next scenario that can cause a kris blade to get stuck in the sampir is due to a hard force applied to the hilt. This can happen in several situations, such as improperly returning the blade into the sampir, improper storage, where this kris gets tumbled around and gets banged against another object, or the kris dropping from a height and landing hilt first. These are just a few examples of how a kris blade can become tightly wedged into the sampir itself. For this demonstration, I'm using a cheap kodian piece, which costs about $35. I use this for many demonstrations and tests. A kris kodi or kodian serves well for such purposes. Observe the depth of the blade when it's properly seated inside the sampir. This is a standard flush carving design where the entire serah cicak fits snugly inside the sampir. Now, let's demonstrate the locking mechanism that prevents the blade from slipping out when the kris is upturned. However, be warned that if shaken violently, the blade can slip out. Here's how easily the kris blade can be withdrawn from the sheath under normal circumstances. Now, let's take it to the extreme. I'm going to apply significant force to jam the blade into the sampir. Observe how deeply the blade is now seated inside the sampir. This highlights another reason why a kris needs a pendongko or a hilt cup. It helps to prevent the blade from lodging further into the sampir. Now, observe what happens when I try to pull it out. See? It's jammed so tightly that when I try pulling it out as hard as I can, the entire hilt comes off. This demonstrates why, back in the day, when preparing a kris for battle, they never used string or cloth to secure the hilt. Instead, they used resins, or as documented in Mubin Shepherd's book, melted gramophone records to secure the hilt permanently in place. I'll discuss this in a separate video. Right, back to the problem at hand. What do you do if your kris blade gets stuck? Now, someone recently sent me a video showing how to remove a stuck blade using a rubber mallet. While this might be a creative new solution, the concern is that it's being hammered on the top part of the sampir, a very risky place to apply force. Even with sufficient padding on the edges, with a rubber mallet, the tip edges can get chipped off. This method is impractical and risky, especially for krises with ladrangan or Minangkabau style sampir. Another point to consider: if you are out on the battlefield and your kris blade gets stuck, are you going to run home and find a rubber mallet? Shout across the battlefield, "Hey, my kris here is stuck. Anybody got a mallet?" I don't think so. So, let me teach you a simple technique to solve this issue. It surprises me that many are eager to demonstrate their silat skills with weapons on social media. But when it comes to sharing basic and crucial knowledge like this, it's rarely addressed. Hey, if you have learned something new from today's video, do have a care and remember to subscribe, like and share if you would. Your support will help this video reach out to other kris enthusiasts out there and will allow them to discover and explore deeper into the facets of kris collecting in upcoming videos. Do share your thoughts and questions in the comment section below, and let's weave the future of kris collecting together. You don't need any special tools for this technique. You already have everything you need with you. Unless, of course, you were born without hands, in which case handling a kris would be quite challenging. If you understand the laws of physics, this technique will make perfect sense. Here is how you do it. Number 1, hold the kris gently in one hand. Do not tighten your grip. Just hold it lightly at an angle. Ball up your fist of your free hand. In one motion, hit the bottom part of the batang serunai like this. Now, remember, you do not need the strength of a karate chop, just enough force to feel it in your fist. If done right, one tap should be enough to release the stuck blade. If your blade is still stuck, flip it over and repeat. 2 hard knocks, one on each side, should be sufficient if done correctly. See? No special tools required. To illustrate, this is what happens inside the sheath. The part that is stuck is here. By applying force and leverage, the freedom of movement in the lower section allows the energy from your fist to rattle and vibrate both the batang serunai and the blade. This energy travels up and jiggles the wedge blade free. This method reduces the risk of damage to the kris fittings. Now, in a combat situation, this technique gives you enough room and time to free your kris blade from the sheath. This technique applies to all kris types, including kris panjangs and sundangs. The silat community might come up with various excuses as to why this technique has never been demonstrated before. However, the simple truth is, many are not aware of it. If they were, they would have eagerly shown off this skill. This speaks volumes about the quality of their teachings and raises questions about their learning methodology today. So, today, I am openly declaring that I am not ignorant of silat and other forms of close quarters combat techniques and counter techniques. I am honoring my mentors and masters by not openly revealing effective and ruthless life-saving techniques to be used or displayed only when absolutely necessary. Now, some of you might have come across phrases whereby when kept in the sampir, the top part of the badan cicak sits above the line and doesn't sit flush within the sheath. Ignorant and hubristic opinions from some Western forums often argue that this indicates a mismatched sheath, suggesting that the sampir is not the original that came with the blade. However, from my 30 years of collecting experience, I would like to refute this claim with evidence. It appears that krises produced in the Peninsular Malay regions and some parts of the Malay Riau Islands in the early 20th century adopted this design, intentionally to prevent the blade from getting stuck in the sheath. Now, I have collected many examples of this practice, and here are some to share with you. It's rather ingenious if you ask me. This design prevents the application of the technique of jamming an opponent's kris blade into the sheath. The elevated position of the badan cicak limits how deeply the blade can go into the sheath. Such developments give credence to the creative countermeasures adopted to prevent a flawless execution of certain martial art techniques. This thoughtful design showcases the ingenuity and practicality embedded in the traditional craftsmanship of the kris. Before I end today's video, I would like to add on that rust is not a contributing factor that will cause the kris blade to be stuck in the sheath. Anyone who makes claims that a kris blade can rust within a few weeks or a few months is actually reflecting the quality of the kris blade. Authentic kris blades will not rust so easily and so quickly. Only kris kodis or the kodians will have this rusting almost immediately, even with oiling. So that is something that you might want to take note of. And this is something that I would like to correct by anyone who makes such statements. If you missed my previous video on the top 3 frequently asked questions, you can watch it right here. Until my next video, stay curious, start exploring, and keep the legacy of the kris alive.